So, Mark, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate your lowering expectations. And I apologize to all of you in advance for a speech that is going to be shorter than the introduction. But honestly, I appreciate it. Mark is very near and dear to my heart, as I know he is to many in this room. So I want to thank all of you for inviting me to your party. I'm really thrilled to be here. As you know, since 1981, Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Central Blue Ridge has helped connect more than 1,000 kids in Central Virginia with mentors. And I'm proud to say that many of those mentors are UVA students, many of them volunteering through Madison House. So this is an incredibly important organization, an incredibly important cause, and I'm grateful that you've supported it. It's also one that I have to say I feel a deep connection to, both on the receiving end, on the giving end. I served as a Big Brother when I was in college for a couple of years, and I'd like to think that I helped my little brother. But it's really in the mentorship that I've received in my life that I understand the power of this organization. I grew up in a small blue-collar town in northern New Jersey named Midland Park. And it was a tight-knit community. And it was the kind of place where a kid growing up like me had a lot of mentors and coaches and priests. I was raised Catholic. And some of the lessons I learned from those people are still with me today. So Mark mentioned mistakes. I learned from a basketball coach when I was about 10 that it's okay to make mistakes, but if you're going to make mistakes, make sure they're mistakes from exuberance and not from lethargy. I had no idea what exuberance or lethargy meant at the time, but once I figured it out, I realized it was wise advice. I learned from a baseball coach in Little League. We were about 12, and a lot of kids were goofing around, and he was a very disciplined coach, and he said, look, this is not about having fun by goofing around. This is about having fun by getting better at baseball. And if you want to get better at baseball, you'll have fun doing it. If you're not interested in that, you're in the wrong place. And that lesson is carried with me for the rest of my life, that find something you care about and work hard at it, and it'll bring you joy. I learned to be kind when people make mistakes from a priest. So I was an altar boy, and the big thing to do if you were an altar boy in my church was carry the cross down to the altar. And I was about 8 or 9 and it was sort of a junior altar boy, so I never got to do this. And one day, I was the only one who showed up, so I had to carry the cross. What I didn't know is that the cross is actually really heavy. So I'm carrying it down the aisle, and it's swerving and swinging, and people are ducking. And I get up to the altar, and then you have to put it in a stand, which is only slightly wider than the cross. So it's swinging, and my mother, who was in the front pew, said people were ducking in the front pew as the cross was coming along. And so I finally jammed it in, but the rope around my robe was also caught. So I'm standing there stuck on the altar, and the priest comes over and pats me on the shoulder, and he says, so everyone could hear it, "You really stuck that landing, Jim." The last example I'll give is advice I received that literally changed the course of my life. So the high school that I went to consisted of kids from Midland Park and kids from Hohokus. And Hohokus is a relatively affluent suburb in New Jersey, and they were too small to have their own high school, so kids from Hohokus came to Midland Park. So it was this great socioeconomic mix, and one of the mentors I had was the father of a friend of mine who had gone to Princeton. Kids from my high school rarely went to Ivy League schools. It just was not part of the mix. And so I did pretty well in school, and about junior year I was talking to a counselor, and the counselor, or it was maybe fall of senior year, and the counselor said, if you keep this up, you can go to Rutgers. Now, Rutgers is a completely fine institution, but I went home and told my father this. He had never gone to college. He didn't know how the system worked at all. And he asked, we talked about my grades and my test scores and other things I'm doing. He said, well, who's doing better than you? Why can't you go anywhere? And he said, you need to go talk to Mr. 80. This is my father's friend. And I remember as vividly as yesterday, this is 35 years ago, sitting in their living room, in the portion of the house that you never sit in, right? So I was nervous, and it was looking over my GPA and the rest. And he looked at me and he said, "You should apply anywhere you want, and you're going to get in anywhere you apply." And that opened up my eyes to what was possible, and it totally changed my life. And but for that connection, I wouldn't have known what the possibilities were or what the opportunities were. And the sad thing is that we live in an age today where those kinds of connections, those kind of mentorships are fleeting. There's an amazing book by Bob Putnam, the author of Bowling Alone, called Our Kids. And if you haven't read it, I would strongly encourage you to read it. And what he talks about is the fact that you don't see towns like Midland Park anymore, the town that I grew up in, where there were a lot of adults outside of the immediate family ready, willing, and able to give advice, to lend a hand to kids. And I got a great amount of advice and help from my parents, but I also received an awful lot of advice from others, and that's happening less and less frequently. And that's why Big Brothers and Big Sisters is so important, because there are many kids who aren't as lucky as I was growing up in Midland Park. And the basic idea behind Big Brothers and Big Sisters, as you know, is very simple but very powerful. When children have a strong one-to-one relationship with an adult, they're going to be better off in all kinds of ways. And there's no typical little brother or sister. Some come from single parent homes, some from homes where parents are in the military or in prison. Many of the parents enrolled just want their kids to have a relationship with another adult. And connecting them to a mentor, as you know, is also part art and part science. The bigs have to be reliable and good role models, but it's also important to make sure that there's a match on a personal level. And then it happens. It's not about fixing a particular problem, it's about developing a relationship and spending time, and that's exactly what this program is about. And the impact is pretty remarkable. First, you start with the outcomes that are easy to measure. One national study took a large group of kids from different backgrounds and enrolled half of them in Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and then compared outcomes after 18 months. And those who were in the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program were less likely to use drugs or alcohol, to skip class or skip school, or to hit others, which made me think it would have been great if my sister had had a big sibling. That's another story. There are also effects that are harder to measure, but no less important. So kids who go through this program feel safer, have higher expectations for themselves, build stronger relationships in other parts of their lives, whether with friends or with other adults. And the bottom line is pretty simple. It's a lot easier to believe in yourself when someone else believes in you. And as Athena was talking about, this group is reaching even more kids and starting some terrific programs. This year they started Aspire Higher, which is a mentoring program for kids who have had a history with the juvenile justice system, and next year they're starting Thrive, the program for kids from refugee families. The bottom line is that there's more to do, and connecting more kids with mentors is important, not just for them, but for us, for our community, and honestly, for our future. And you never know where these relationships might lead. There's one big from this program who asked her little of over 6 years to serve as a bridesmaid in her wedding. And one of my professional mentors, John Jeffries, who's dean of the law school and was a close mentor of mine, when I was named president of UVA, he made the mistake of saying, "I'll do anything I can to help you." And now he's working for me. This just shows that these relationships can last a lifetime, even when life takes you to places you never expect. So I hope you'll continue to support this incredibly important program. I want to thank you again for being here, and thank you again for inviting me to your party.